What is going on, guys? Welcome to the start of a brand new series where I'm talking about guitar gear and my recommendations for you guys. And we are starting with the age-old debate, the two classics, the Les Paul and the Fender Stratocaster. I've chosen to begin this series with these two guitars because they epitomise the two ends of the spectrum that we have typically, with the classic sound of single coiled pickups and then the classic sound of humbucking pickups. So let's start with that because that is the main difference that you will hear between the sound of these two guitars. These are the single coils here, and we can see a single line for each of the three pickups that are on this Fender guitar. And then we can see what can appear to be two single coil pickups together, which is called a humbucking pickup. This pickup would look the same as this, but it has a cover on it. So that's the difference between, the appearance of these. They would look the same. This one just has a cover. This one has no cover. And the single coil pickups on this Fender Strat will typically give us a cleaner sound, and the humbuckers on this guitar will give us a heavier sound typically. Though the range of sounds that you can get from these will depend on the amplifier that you use and any pedals, etc, etc. But let me give you a quick blast of what these guitars sound like, just as a quick comparison to get us started. So for the remainder of this video, I'm going to be typically talking about my personal opinions about these two guitars and telling you why I've chosen these two for you guys. And I'm also keeping my audience in mind. And I know a large proportion of you guys are complete beginners or would class yourselves as kind of beginner to intermediate guitarists, mainly because two of my biggest videos are absolute beginner guitar lessons here on YouTube. So, that's just going to be the majority of my audience from that side of things. As I say, links to the spec and exactly what guitars I have here are in the description below. So this is a 50s style Fender Stratocaster from what is currently known as the Classic series. So they have different series of guitars that will be styled the same. But this is from the Classic series. It is made in Mexico, so we'd call it a Mexican Strat. And this keeps the price of this guitar down to a range that most people can afford when they want to perhaps upgrade their guitar and their instrument from a total beginner guitar to get something up at that next level without completely going over the top and bursting the bank and getting into the thousands and thousands of pounds. I chose to show you guys this guitar because it's a great option for beginners that maybe have a Squier or some kind of cheaper guitar to get that next step up as their kind of first proper instrument that's of super good quality. This is really, really comparable to, guitars that are worth a couple of thousands of pounds. Just look at any of the, blindfold tests between a Mexican Strat and then an American Strat, and it is very hard to tell the difference, without being a real connoisseur of it. The Fender Stratocaster in general is synonymous with many of the best guitarists that have ever lived, including Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, you name it. At some point, every pro guitarist has probably owned and played a Fender Stratocaster. Now, I would love to know your thoughts, so let me know down in the comments below your preference between a Les Paul and a Stratocaster, or whatever other guitars you want me to try out on this channel. But in my opinion, the Fender Stratocaster is definitely synonymous with a certain type of sound. And that kind of derives from some of the first recordings that were used with a Fender Stratocaster back in the 50s and 60s. One of those in particular was Apache. That sort of clean Fender twang, and I'm on a clean sound on my amplifier now, is kind of what a Stratocaster is known to do best or better than most or many other guitars. It's just the sound that it's more synonymous with. Now, of course, we can put an overdrive pedal in front of this, we can use a high gain amp, and then we will be able to get a heavier sound with this guitar. You will. It's one of the most versatile guitars that we have, really. It's just that when we can crank the gain, if we use normal single coil pickups like are on this one, these are just Fender standard ones, I believe, then what can happen is we can get some hiss or hum from the amplifier because of the amount of gain or the amount of overdrive that we're using. And the idea of humbuckers is that they buck the hum, they stop the hum, literally by doubling the amount of signal because we have two magnets, but when you're not playing, that signal cancels each other out and it sort of acts like a noise suppressor. But a very natural and organic way of doing noise suppression. So that's the idea of humbuckers from in terms of being better for high gain. And as I say, the Stratocaster and the Les Paul are the two typical guitars where we'd have a great example of single coils and a great example of humbucking pickups. Another difference between these guitars is obviously the number of pickups, so that we have 3 single coil pickups on a Stratocaster and typically 5 different points that we can switch between, which would be the neck pickup, the neck in the middle, middle on its own, middle and the bridge pickup, and then just the bridge pickup. So kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would be the difference between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 2 separate tone controls. Typically, and I think most guitarists are guilty of this, tone control for me on any guitar is always up. I'm getting a little bit more into volume control these days because I am liking to just keep my amp on kind of crunch all the time, just with enough bite. Adding overdrive on a pedal or something when I need it, and then rather than going to full clean, just kind of backing off the volume control. That's when I'm living at the moment for most of my tones. Not song, obviously we can go song specific when I'm doing a tutorial, but when I'm just playing for fun and to get my tones, that's what I'm doing. On the Les Paul, it is just a 3-way switch because we only have 2 pickups, so just the bridge on its own, bridge and neck together, and then the neck pickup. They're the 3 positions, 3 different tones. Talking about the styling of a Fender Stratocaster in general, we have one of the most ergonomic designs of a guitar that there is, even though it was one of the earliest kind of electric guitar designs. Great access all the way up to the highest fret, which is a little bit harder on a Les Paul, it has to be said. To many people, This is just what an electric guitar looks like, never mind a type of electric guitar. This just summarizes rock and roll or what they think of when they think of an electric guitar. This brings me on to the Les Paul guitar, because for me personally, a Les Paul guitar is what I think of when I think of an electric guitar. It is the guitar that summarizes electric guitar music and rock and roll for me personally. I know everyone watching this video will have a personal preference between a Fender or a Les Paul, all be a very diplomatic person and be able to see that they both have their uses, they both, you know, have total equal value, and you may own both and go between them both, you know, quite equally, and that's totally cool. My personal preference is always for a Les Paul personally. In my opinion, it always just looked like a really special and classy instrument. I thought it just looks an expensive and wonderful design. This particular model, you know, this is an Epiphone Les Paul Standard Plus. The Plus model is just a slight variation on the Les Paul Standard, a little bit rarer. I think a lot of it has to do with, frankly, just the colours and things that they come in. It's a little bit longer at the neck here than a standard one, but there's not a lot of difference. The biggest difference that I've personally done to this guitar is the pickup. I have put a Seymour Duncan SH1 59 model, which I will link to in the description below, in the bridge, and I did that to kind of simulate the Jimmy Page sound, that vintage old Les Paul sound, the PAF sound basically. Patent applied for is it's one of those kind of sounds that I wanted to recreate, and I've known people spend a couple of thousands of pounds on guitars and then change the pickups and upgrade the pickups, and I never saw the reason to do that back when I was, 15. I was like, no, that sounds crazy. I'll get the guitar that I want and that I like to play and get a particularly good model, because even for the same model, some play better or worse than the others. But upgrade the pickup and then I'll get the sound that I want. And I've always been so happy with the sound of this guitar that I've always been really reluctant to, spend a couple of grand on getting a Gibson, because I'm like, it might not sound as good as this one personally. It's just one of those personal things, I guess. I did actually get this just second hand. I think it was about a week old from the guy that I bought it from, who was going to learn guitar and then ended up buying a motorbike instead, so needed money for that. So I kind of feel like I rescued this guitar, and therefore I've done many gigs with this guitar, probably a couple of thousand gigs over the years, and it feels I do feel an affinity for it, as you should with any guitar instrument. It kind of becomes a part of you, and it's part of the appeal of it. Another upgrade that I made for this Epiphone, and a problem with Epiphones that many of you will know, I'm sure, is that I've changed the input socket, or the output socket, I should say, here, because these come in plastic and these can crack after a couple of years or so. It is a super cheap part to replace. So the pickup, I think, cost me back in the day about £65. And then I got a guitar luthier to solder it in for me and to put it in, because I'm no good at soldering. I really suck at soldering, it's really terrible. So that, probably cost £80 in total to get that pickup in there. This cost about £5. £5, really, really cheap, a really worthy investment, and that's been solid for about the last 12 years. But it really did only last 3 years when I got it, which was a bit of a disappointment. The neck pickup I haven't changed, that's stock, that is standard, because I rarely use it, and for what I need it for, I kind of like the sound of it for the stuff that I would use the neck pickup for. Now let's get on to my personal loves and hates about this Les Paul and Les Pauls in general, and also about the Fender Stratocaster. So for this one, first of all, seeing as it is my own, the little things with the Epiphone, the couple of upgrades that I've had to do would be the first bugbears. I'm not a fan of the standard pickups that come in most Les Paul standards. I would choose to upgrade them, or I would choose to change them just to get the personal sound that I prefer. I prefer the sort of heritage sound rather than the more modern higher output, or just the sound of like the burst booker pickups and things like that. I'm not a fan of that kind of thing. I like the vintage sound. The input cracking, that has been a thing in the past. The toggle switch has never gone on this one, but I've known it go on Epiphones before. So literally, you know, you'll be changing between the bridge pickup and the neck pickup, and then at some point it just won't make any sound, and you'll be like, what's wrong with it? And it'll sort of act like a kill switch. That can happen on them. But I love the slimmer neck. It's got a very sort of flat fretboard and slim, exactly to my liking, playing low down on the neck, playing higher up the neck. The access could be better up here. We have a big chunky bit here, which can be difficult to get up to, but again, I learned how to play a lead guitar on this guitar, so that's never really been an issue, because however that was just the way guitars were, so it's never been that much of an issue. The main thing is I love the sound of this PAF style pickup. That gives me the sound that I want. It looks how I want a guitar to look. It's one of those things. I guess a bugbear about the Epiphone, just in general. One thing on the style, and I saw another guy make a video about this the other day, where the headstock has these two bits that essentially look missing. Like it's like the Gibson one, but with these bits chopped off. And that does seem a real shame, because, you know, I believe, you know, the fully licensed products by Gibson. There are other Epiphones that do have the horns as they were still on them, the pointy bits. So I do feel that's a bit of a shame. But yes, I mean, if we lose that part and we really just think about the instrument that we're playing, there's such little difference between a good, you know, there are good and bad one guitar from another, even if they're exactly the same model. That's why I highly believe that you should check out guitars in a guitar shop and try them there, and, you know, try them for yourself and think, yes, I'll buy that one. That's what I did with this one, although it was second hand. I tried it before I bought it. But if we think about the rest of the guitar, 98% of the guitar I absolutely love, and then it's just kind of this bit. That's the only bit that I don't love about it, I guess. They're my loves and hates about a Les Paul in general. Things I love and hate personally about a Fender Stratocaster. Now this goes way back to when I was first learning my first chords on guitar and could not play at all, and my older brother John had a Stratocaster style guitar. So this was like the first instrument that was an electric guitar. I wanted one more than anything, held it on my knee and had a go at playing my first chord. And the first chord my brother taught me was a C chord. And I think the first time I had a go at it, I might have been about 6 years old. And a C chord on a Fender Stratocaster just seemed like the biggest, most awkward stretch that I could possibly do. Now I think it was a slightly, this is a V-neck on this 50s Stratocaster, 50s style classic series Stratocaster. The one that I tried that first on was a really C neck, so a really fat and rounded neck, and I just really hated that with my kind of smaller hands, and you know, I was 6 years old or something. So that did put me off an awful lot. Back in the day, they always felt really heavy as well. Now that was back when I was really young, so you know, compared to a Les Paul, these are lighter and slimmer than a Les Paul typically, but that part of the neck, in my opinion, isn't compared to a standard, a Les Paul standard, any kind of Les Paul standard. The fretboard is more curved, which isn't quite to my personal preference, though I know a lot of people love the curve. The styling has never quite been to my preference. Again, that's total personal opinion. I am just more a fan of the Gibson styling, sort of to a fault, because you know there are issues with the Les Paul styling that I've talked about a little bit. There is certainly no other guitar that does the Fender twang kind of like a Fender Stratocaster. A Telecaster has its sound, and the Stratocaster very much, you know, there's no other guitar that will sound like it. If that is the sound and the look that you want, then there's nothing anyone is going to say to sort of change your mind on that. And we should all have our personal opinions on guitar. This is a good thing. It should mean that much to you that it is a personal opinion. In my personal opinion, it's just never been my go-to. When I've tried them, a friend's had a Stratocaster, or I've tried them in the guitar shop, it's just never been my go-to. A great thing about it is they are typically, the Fender Stratocaster and the Telecaster are typically kind of seen as more working man's guitars. They're more like a block of wood and a bit more, you know, indestructible and things like that. And you know, that's kind of how they're seen. They're more salt of the earth type, and the Gibsons are a bit more flash. Therefore, the Stratocaster and things should appeal more to me, because that's kind of how I see myself. But it's one of those. We don't get to choose our feelings on things. We don't get to choose what we love and what's not to our kind of thing. It has to be said that the Fender Stratocaster is one of the most iconic guitars that there is. It's one of the guitars that is synonymous with the birth of rock and roll right back from the 50s. It has to be said that it has never been my preference of look over other guitars. I'm personally more of a Les Paul player, but you know, it cannot be discredited for anything bad about the look of this guitar. It is just too iconic and synonymous with rock and roll, and specifically that kind of blues or vintage rock. And there you have it. They're my thoughts on Stratocaster versus Les Paul. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what other guitars, effects and amplifiers you would like me to compare in this new series, and I will see you in another video. Thank you so much for the support, guys. I will see you again.